Oh,
Oh,
is that really what happened?
It has to
You
be.
didn't record the video?
It has to be.
Oh.
the fun part is I was talking to the listeners that weren't there, so that's good.
I did the audio people listen.
Yeah.
Thank God, at least we. So, to be fair, I did hit record the first time.
Okay.
When the whole thing was jacked up and nothing was working.
Okay.
And I must not have hit it the second.
Oh.
Hey, Grayson. Must not have hit it the second
Hey, Danielle. Hey,
time.
Kathy.
Oh boy. I got bad news for you patrons. And I'm trying to like rack my brain. Like, why wouldn't StreamYard still capture that? Like, why shouldn't I be able to just say I want a recording of what we did?
Well, I agree.
But I can't.
Really?
I don't think so.
Ahoy, friends.
I don't think
But what?
so.
So you just hit the. Oh, right. Okay. So we were on StreamYard, but we were basically using StreamYard as Zoom
Just to have a conversation, apparently.
while you recorded the audio. Got it.
You're doing great. You are really, really killing it today.
Now here's an idea, and hear me out. Hear me out.
Happy to do
I'd
it.
like for you to take a series of screenshots right now where each one of us takes turns going like with different lip flaps, and then people are still just, they're working, they're doing other stuff. You just put a series of still shots up there, and people will think every time they glance over that it's live and that one of us is talking.
So publish it as a video.
Yes.
But it's just still shots of us.
Rotating. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Nobody just sits there and watches it.
Hey.
They just want to glance over from time to time.
For you folks,
Nope, my turn. Fuck Bob at the moment. Hey, all my YouTube people, since you're here, what's a MacGuffin? Let's figure out if anybody else knows what a MacGuffin is, because I don't.
Anyone that is into like movies knows what a MacGuffin is.
I think you're making shit up.
Even after you read it, you
true.
still don't understand it, do you?
No.
It's basically a misdirect.
It's not even that.
It is, right, Janet? Am I wrong?
It's
more
an
complicated than
object
that.
or a device in a movie or a book that serves merely
Yeah.
as a trigger for the plot.
Yeah.
Yeah, misdirect.
That doesn't say anything about misdirect.
Oh no, I think it's true that you might have meant red herring.
No,
I just realized you said MacGuffin. Yeah. MacGuffin is there is one big MacGuffin in this, but there aren't a series of them.
Are you just fucking with me at this point? You
No.
guys are just
You looked it
saying
up.
MacGuffin?
Listen, my
Oh
understanding.
wait, did you look it up or did someone?
No, I looked it up.
right
I
there?
looked up
Yeah.
MacGuffin.
Well,
Yeah, so somebody says a
so you
MacGuffin
know
is a
it
red
is.
herring in a story. That's what Jen says in the YouTube chat.
Well, this says an example of MacGuffin: the stone in Harry Potter in the Philosopher's Stone, or the word rosebud in
It's
the film
something you
Citizen
think
Kane.
is important, but it's actually meaningless.
Well, that's not what you said.
Yeah, it's like it serves the purpose of misdirecting you.
But I don't know
Janet's
if it's
looking at-
necessarily always misdirecting you.
What's the big famous the biggest famous MacGuffin?
Rosebud.
Rosebud? Janet,
I think we need an updated MacGuffin because a lot of people haven't seen Citizen Kane.
The stone from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
I don't know if I would call that.
That's what Google says.
Now I'm
So
confused.
when I'm writing stuff,
What's the difference between a red herring and a MacGuffin? Other people have asked this.
An upside
red
down
herring.
muffin.
There's the comment of the day right there by Brian
It's an upside
Blanchett.
down muffin.
An upside down muffin. There you go.
Red herring is usually meant to make a story more fun and mysterious, where a MacGuffin might drive the plot.
Yes.
No.
But now that now I do think that can there be more than one MacGuffin in a movie? If there can be, then yeah, some of what you're saying makes sense, but some of it is more red herring.
So just
stuff.
the way it was explained to me by my idiot community college teachers whenever I was in like a creative writing class.
I like it.
Shout out to them.
By the way, I'm not
Respect.
saying that community college teachers are idiots. I was one. What I'm saying is Janet and Zach are telling me that mine were idiots. Was that when you were writing a story, that if you draw the audience's attention to something to make them without putting a pin on it, but show them something that makes them think a certain thing is going to happen. When really you're going a different direction, they would describe that as a MacGuffin.
That sounds right to me.
That's a misdirection.
So far, everything has sounded right to me. Have you noticed that?
Is there anything sound wrong to you?
I've agreed with every theory.
Google says. Google doesn't say that.
Yeah, but I think it's just, so when I say misdirect, that's my words putting on the thing that I just described, which is just, yeah, it's a thing. And sometimes it's not even like a scene or anything. Sometimes it could just be like a thing, like the stone, right? It's a thing
Yeah.
that's in the scene that your eyes drawn to, and you're like,
Hmm.
oh, that can't be there by accident. There's a reason that's there. And then you start
Mhm.
trying to figure out what that thing is and why it's there.
Mhm.
And then only to find out later it doesn't mean anything.
All right. So this says referring to a plot device wherein a character pursues an object, though the object's actual nature is not important to the story.
Exactly. Misdirect.
Oh.
But listen, not misdirect, but it's precisely what I just described, is it not?
Yeah.
It
True or
is,
false? Yeah.
but you described it you started wrong.
I'm sorry, Mr. Winkler, for calling you an idiot.
Who's Winkler?
Oh, Mr. Winkler.
I want to McMuffin.
Mr. Winkler is a name that I just made up to be my creative writing teacher at the community college because I never took a creative writing class at a community college. I should put that out there.
So
I should
many
be.
lies. The whole
There was a
creative writing
lot.
class was one big MacGuffin.
That's exactly right. Now that's a MacGuffin.
We got meta quick.
Before we start this show, for any of you that are in the live that are also patrons, which I'm sure there's several of you.
Are you going to say this in the episode? In the housekeeping?
Yes.
So maybe you just
See how I just started that
That's a
sentence?
good shutdown.
That was a
of
MacGuffin.
Bob. Zach,
That
good
sentence was a
job.
MacGuffin. Yeah.
That was an immediate shutdown. Effective.
Like it was gonna ruin your fucking day if I said it twice. Listen, I know that I fucked something up, and I want to immediately get ahead of the mean emails that I'm gonna get.
we're not going to get anywhere. This is going to be a horrible episode.
Should we just start the show?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I got to do first is we're gonna now put an end to the pregame, and we're gonna
Are we sold on
start
that?
tailgating.
I mean, pregame's all right. I just feel like
pre-gaming.
pre-gaming.
We're pre-gaming.
The pregame.
Pre-gamers, we'll see you next week.
The pre.
That's off. They have no idea. The Patreon has the YouTube has no idea what's happening.
Yeah,
All right, now we hit record. You and me
Great.
hit record.
I can do that.
Say when.
3, 2, 1, record.
And then I'll do the other count.
Great.
1, 2, 3.
Gosh, that's fun.
It's a good time. It's a
That's
real
great.
good time. Grayson thought I was talking about Henry Winkler. I don't know why that might have been why that name popped
The
in
only
my head.
Winkler I can think of. Yeah.
This is why I could never be an improviser. I couldn't, in mid-sentence, I had to think of a name, and I came up with Winkler.
Could have been worse. Could have said sorry, Mr. Varney or Mr. Weaver or Mr. Ruff. So
True. Yeah, right.
well played.
Yeah. Could have happened. Hey, let's have Zach start the show. What do you say, guys?
Love it.
Hi, Brandon. It's just me and you, buddy. Just me and you.
Oh, hi, Brandon.
And Janet.
Hi, Brandon.
What is happening?
Oh. I have the YouTube on.
What?
Can you hear that? Or is it playing through your head?
I can't hear anything.
Because it's
The
real
noise
fucked up
canceling
on our
is
end.
Oh, no. You guys. What is happening?
That was a trip for us. So I had the YouTube
Oh,
on the other screen, but it wasn't muted. So it was playing through our headphones on a delay, which normally would have jumped right out to us because we're talking, but because we were just very quietly and spread apart going, hi, Brandon. Hi, Brandon.
yeah.
It was like someone else was whispering hi, Brandon into our ears. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, Brandon.
Can I go? Ahoy, friends. Thank you for tuning in to Truth and Justice. You are listening to the Friday follow-up for season 14, The Reply Brief. This week the last few weeks we had a lot of discussion surrounding the letters written by Asia McClain and the prosecutor's coverage of these letters. And this week we got what we all looked for. Asia's reply. Today, as usual, I'm joined I can't get through this right now. Today, as usual, I'm joined by Bob and Janet, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what these two have to say about this. And I might have a few thoughts of my own. But before we get into that discussion, do we have any housekeeping? barely got through that.
For some reason, of everything that just happened, you saying flots really got to me. I don't know. But you had some flots of your own. All right, let me come in and be serious, Brandon. Make this sound good, Brandon. Yeah, so real quick, kind of a big thing, and this really kind of only affects the patrons or any people who are maybe thinking about being patrons. Well, two things. One, an apology. So because of thing 2, I messed up thing 1 today. And we had some audio issues. So what I'm getting at is if you like to watch the behind the scenes hour-long pre-show video every Friday, you're not going to today. And that's because I forgot to hit the record button on the video. The second time we started once and the audio was all messed up, and then we started again. And then I figured out at the very end that I had never hit record on that. So that's the bad news. The good news is part of the confusion was I had people, we get maybe 10% of the people that are able to watch, that do watch our behind the scenes videos every Friday. And I've had people say like, oh, I just don't want to watch videos. I can't, I'm never in a place where I can have a video going. And so it occurred to me that what we could do to give you guys some extra content and also help fill your week is we are now from this point forward going to start audio recording our hour-long pre-show. And I'm going to publish those on Wednesday mornings. So you can listen to the audio version of our hour-long pre-show every Wednesday. For those of you that don't watch the videos now and don't know what you're getting into, there is nothing you need to hear in those. Let me explain that. So what we do every week is for an hour before the follow-up starts, Zach and Janet and I never get a time to sit down and talk. So that is our weekly chat session. So the three of us sit down and we just talk about whatever, not about the case, not about true crime, not about anything in particular, just about our lives. We goof around, we joke around. I would say it borders more on a conversational comedy show than a true crime show,
for sure.
So if that's not something you're just if you're on Patreon and you see that come up in your audio feed on Wednesdays and that sounds terrible to you, just ignore it. But we've got in there for the people that do want to hear it and are interested in that and just want something fun. It's just kind of a lighten the mood type of thing in the middle of the week. That'll be dropping on Wednesdays. So you'll have so now for our Patreon, our patrons, what you have the main episode on Sunday. On Wednesdays, you'll get we're gonna call that show, which is literally we just slapped a name on a thing we're already doing. We're gonna call that show pre-gaming. Janet loves it. She came up with the name and the logo.
Nope. Did not come up with it.
Also, you called it pre-game, not pre-gaming.
I think on the logo I sent Janet, it says pre-gaming, I think. But that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. We're pre-gaming. Right. So Monday you get the main episode. Wednesdays, the patrons will get the pre-gaming show, which is an hour of nonsense. And then it's pre-game. That's right. It's called pre-game. And then on Friday, you'll get the normal Friday follow-up episodes. And also on Friday, you get the full video version of the entire full 2 hours that we do for the follow-up, which is the hour pre-game show and then the hour-long actual follow-up. You get the behind the scenes of all of that. So in the video version on Friday. So want to let you guys know that all that stuff's coming up. So now you'll have 3. If you're on Patreon, you'll have 3 audio podcasts coming out every week on Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday. Now you'll still get your Friday one, except this week because I forgot to hit record. You'll still get it. You'll still get the video version of the behind the scenes, but you just won't have the video version of the follow-up content. Also, last warning before we get into our last housekeeping thing about that before we get back into the serious part of the show is that will be completely unedited. And I mean completely. My intention is just to take it, run it through a sound leveler, and put it out there. No frills, no nothing. You're going to hear breath noises and clicks and all kinds of whatever's in there is in there. We're just going to drop it for you guys to hear it. So it's very uncut. And with that, I don't think, any other housekeeping that's actually relevant to the main part of the show is our holiday schedule. We will be off the week of Christmas from all shows for that week. And so that is, we have the main episode that's going to drop in 2 days on Sunday. And then we'll have the follow-up this week on Friday. And then that will be it until the main episode that will be on, I think the 30th, whatever Sunday that is in January. So there'll be no main episode on Christmas Eve, and there will be no follow-up that following Friday. There will be a main episode. It's just 1 week off that we'll have off there. So just to let you guys know all of that. So everybody, if you celebrate or however you celebrate with your families, for those of you that do, just take some time for your family. That's what we intend on doing. And we'll be back after that. So that's the schedule coming up. That's the big announcement for patrons. And with that, I think we can get right into the content for this week, which was all about Asia. I love this episode. I love Asia to death. I think I love the fact that she has been so open to it's such a contrast. I'm gonna do my best not to get real angry in this one, but she is such a contrast to the people that were talking about her and accusing her, in the fact that she did and has always been willing to open herself up. She's never asked for what list of questions, here's the things you can't talk about, none of that. I said, hey, do you want to come on and give your side of the story? Yep. And we sat down, and then you heard the whole thing uncut. And I really respect the hell out of Asia and appreciate her coming on. And so I love that she got the opportunity to speak for herself on that. And since usually it's me and Zach going back and forth for a while, we'll start this week with Janet. What did you think?
Oh, well, I think, it was a good reminder, I think, for all of us. You are constantly making this clear, and I think I do feel very happy in being a part of this particular community, because I think it is full of people who are constantly very aware, sometimes painfully aware, that these are real people and real events and real impacts that are being made by certain podcasts and by discussions and by social media and all of that kind of stuff. And I think, when you are making a podcast where you're talking about old cases and weighing in with opinions on present tense stuff and talking about more maybe light things, and then you dive into a podcast where you are talking about something that has a very real impact on a person's life right now, and in fact multiple people's lives, you sort of get chatty about, like, oh, this person's lying. Oh, this is 100% what happened. Like, oh, come on. Like, we're just talking about a thing together. We're just two friends talking about something. And I think people slip into that. I'm not saying whether or not that was the intention. I think it's really powerful to have Asia say, hi, over here. I'm the person you're talking about. I'm living right now. I'm walking around on this earth, and you are telling everyone that I am a liar. And that
Right.
matters. It's not just a gossipy chat about theories about a case. And we all need to be reminded of that. But this is a very powerful message. And I thought it was great. And I feel exactly the same way about Asia as you do.
Yeah, I agree. And to your point, the big thing about this is there's no evidence to support it. It's merely opinion when these people are going to this large audience and saying, because of course, what I get back is, well, you've said that so-and-so's lying on, on this case, or so-and-so's lying on that case. And what I try to do, and I'm sure I've never always been perfect about it, but what I try to do is, if I say for fact that someone is lying, it's because for a fact they are, meaning like, well, they said this to this person and they said the opposite to this person. Both of those can't be true. They're lying to one of them. Or they said they were in town all night, but we can see their cell phone is moving somewhere else. We know they're lying. In this case, it's just, we're lying. She's lying. That's 100% what happened. And again, and beyond lying, as I pointed out in the episode multiple times, is that she has written several sworn affidavits and testified under oath to these things. So what they told the world she did was committed perjury on multiple occasions on top of lying.
Asia's a badass. That's what I see.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's first and foremost. That's the first thing I see is Asia is a badass, and it seems to be that, in my opinion, from everything I've seen as an outsider, I mean, she seems to be telling the truth, or her truth. Her story doesn't seem to waver. It's always the same, which is big. If you're telling the truth, you don't have to think of things. You don't have to worry about it, because you know what really happened.
Yeah.
And that's big for me. And I there was a big point in this episode that I caught something that I I don't know that's ever been brought. I don't know if it's been brought up, or I for sure haven't heard it yet. Is the idea that they brought up this big idea of her getting the address wrong when she sent Adnan this letter, but then you said it and she said it, that it was in a newspaper or some kind of press, that the address was wrong, and she sent it to that address.
Right.
That's the first I've heard. Why would they not talk about that at all?
Well, why do they not talk about a lot of things? Like, why do they not talk about Juwan Gordon's affidavit? We didn't really get into, or we touched on a little bit last week. But so what's interesting about this timing wise is the episode for the patrons I'm doing right now on part 12. They again circle back and are hammering on Asia again, but there's overlap there. So when they were making their episode 12, I had already started the reply brief, and they were already getting pushback about this issue.
Okay.
About so they bring up in their part 12, oh, well, some people said we didn't see this, we didn't discuss this affidavit, and we get into that in this week's episode. They address it now. The way they do it is, I'm not thrilled with the way they did that either. But yeah, so, and again, and also in that part, so for your patrons on Sunday, they get into her testimony at the PCR hearing and completely misrepresent how that went. So there's a lot of that, but what you find in this series is, Brett, they want to circle back and hammer on to things that they think can shake you, right? So here's the thing with Asia. First of all, what upset me about Asia is that they accused her of lying. They accused her of perjury. But the reality is, for the case, Asia doesn't actually matter. The only reason we thought Asia mattered was because the state, in their closing argument, said that Jay called Adnan to pick him up at 2:36, and then Sarah Koenig reported that, which was accurate. That's what they said. But she also presented that as fact. So it was like, well, if he supposedly had already killed her and was calling Jay at 2:36, and Asia says that he was in the library with her till 2:40, she's the alibi. Well, now we know that there's no possible way for it to have been 2:36. There's really no possible way for it to have been 3:15 either, but that's beside the point. But even if it's 3:15, well, now if Adnan was with Asia until 2:40, that doesn't clear him.
Yeah.
And people got to, like, you have to be honest about every single element of this case. And the truth is, Asia is not an alibi for Adnan. But him being with her until 2:40 does not prove that he couldn't have killed Hay, because Hay was reported as being seen in the school past 2:45 up till almost 3:00. So it doesn't alibi him. So whether or not, because the question becomes, one, did she lie? And then there's this huge, nonsense about Adnan writing the letter. And then two, if she's telling the truth, does she have the right day? My feelings are she's 100% telling her truth, is the way you put it. I think that's a good way to put it. She believes that's what she believes. That day she saw Adnan was the 13th, and she very well may be right about that. I think so the question is, did she have the right day? And I think probably. She has some anchors. We didn't really get into it, but she ended up getting stuck at her boyfriend's for a couple days because the ice storm came in that night. There's some question about that. Is the only reason I say she probably has the right day, and that's because the storm didn't come in until like 2:00 in the morning. So people have pointed that out. It's a fair argument. It could be that she was getting ready to come home for curfew at midnight, and her mom was like, "There's a storm coming. Just stay there." That could be the way it happened, or it could just be she's mixed up on the days. I don't know.
Well, wait, then what day would it have been?
And that's the thing. I don't think there's another day that fits. Yeah. So most likely she has the right day, but also whether she does or not isn't instrumental to figuring out what happened in this case, because she believes she saw Adnan at a time where she could have seen Adnan, and then he still could have killed Hay.
Right.
The more important alibi witnesses are Becky, who saw Hay and Adnan together after school around 2:45, where Adnan goes up to her and she says, "Hey, something came up. I can't give you that ride." And he says, "Okay, I'll just get one with somebody else." And they walk away in different directions. And then after that, Debbie seeing him in the guidance counselor's office, and then later seeing Hay up at the front of the school, and Inez seeing Hay later. And then most importantly, Coach Sai saying that Adnan was at track practice on time. Like those are his alibis. Asia's really not an alibi.
Yeah, for the purposes of this. I mean, Jennifer in the chat points out, yes, we all agree that for the trial and for the discussions and appeals that happened afterwards, she is very important because
Yes.
you can't just tell an entire story about something that happened, citing specific times that things were happening, like calling someone and saying, please come and get me. I'm testifying that this person had already killed someone at this point, and then just flip that around because it's more convenient. Like, that's why you have the conversations, and judges are saying, yes, this matters. But
Yeah.
for
Well,
the purposes of this discussion, that's a broad discussion of did he do it at all under any circumstances? She becomes less important.
yeah, in a practical way of looking at it, it doesn't matter. But yeah, absolutely for the appeals, it does. But and the reason it failed on appeal was because of the wiggle room in the time. Because you have two things that the defense is fighting against. So you have the fact that Jay testified that the call didn't happen until after 3:40.
Right.
Jen testified the same thing, but then the prosecution in closing said it happened at 2:36. So the argument from the state is, well, fine, then we won't use the 2:36 call. We'll use 3:15 call. We can move, we can move it back. And there was no clear. It never should have been allowed at trial. I don't think they should have been allowed to fudge that number and just basically they presented false information in the closing when they said that the come get me call up in 2:36. There's no evidence to support that whatsoever.
I thought it was interesting too when she talked about the idea that she was never talked to, and she's like, well, how do they even know what I have to say? Like they don't even know if they can use me or not because they never talked to me, period.
Right.
And so I thought that was really, like, she even felt that way about that.
She always did. And she said that she always assumed that the time that she could account for didn't matter because she wrote the letters. Nobody ever called her. So she's like, oh, well, that's not a matter, because she didn't know when Hay was killed. So she's like, well, I guess it didn't matter. And then she went on about her life until, somebody came knocking on her door.
And I would say the other thing that matters, again, not about whether or not Adnan committed this act, but in a way that tells us an awful lot about the standards and practices of the attorneys involved, is everything we find out about Uric afterwards. I mean, that's really important information to know about a person who was instrumental in the incarceration of someone that we believe is innocent. So I'm glad in a way that all of this happened the way it did, because quite honestly, it just makes Uric look even worse.
Yeah. I mean, it was terrible. I mean, inconscionable what he did. And I don't want to go too far because I know there's questions about this. So we should probably get into the questions at this point.
Sure. Well, the first thing I wanted to touch on is, if you recall last week in the follow-up, we had a question about Jay's description of Hay in the trunk and the blue color that was in question. And you had mentioned that didn't really necessarily match your experience working as a firefighter and being in situations in which you would find and see people who had passed away. And so I don't know if you had a chance to check in on that further, but we also had a comment from Rosalind about that and her own experience as a nurse of 28 years and having seen many deceased people.
Yeah, I saw that, and so I'll share what I looked up, and then if you want to share what Rosalind put in there, or I can summarize it real quick because I read that too. But yeah, so I looked it up, and according to the textbooks and the internet, it takes a couple of hours before you'll start seeing like a blue haze on a person's body. Like generally like fingernails, lips, things like that. And then that begins to fade pretty quickly after that, as lividity and stuff starts to settle in. But then Rosalind, that was her name, right? Rosalind? Yeah. She pointed out that that in all of her years as a nurse dealing with lots of deceased people, that generally deceased people don't turn blue. Like people will turn blue when they're having a lack of oxygen before they die, but once they're dead, the circulation stops. You don't necessarily see that. She said you usually don't see that. But what I found even more intriguing that I never thought about was she said that in people of color, when they pass away and shortly thereafter, not only do you not get a blue tint, but you get almost a yellow tint as the the blood is draining out of them because they're going down to the lowest point because their heart's no longer pumping. And it hadn't really occurred to me before until she said that. She said, but Hay was a person of color. So, what she was saying in a nutshell was she doesn't believe there's any way that Hay would have looked blue at all.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you just said it perfectly. That's what Rosalind was weighing in on. I thought it was really interesting too. Okay. Kathy says, do you know if Asia can or will sue the prosecutors for defamation of character? And this is a really interesting conversation. This has come up a lot, even just since we started talking about Asia most recently. There have been a lot of questions around that, kind of talking about what are your rights if someone calls you something and all of that. And would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so actually Asia we talked quite a bit about it afterwards because she did want to sue them and has every right to do so. The problem that Asia ran into was that because she wrote a book and she's considered like a public figure, she feels I don't want to put I'll just say this. After consulting with an attorney, she feels that even as a public figure, what they did meets the criteria for defamation. But the cost for the type of lawyer she would need to sue them was pretty high. And she just ultimately, I don't know what she's decided at that point when I was discussing it with her. She was like, I don't know if she can justify spending that much money on an attorney, but it sucks because people should be held accountable. There's so many people in this case, both in the actual involved in the actual case, the guys like Kevin Urich, all the way up to these prosecutors that just have no accountability, and it's frustrating. And everybody wants to get the accountability, and that was kind of a way she thought that they could get some accountability, but ultimately decided that it just. Again, I don't want to say she ultimately decided. Last we discussed it, it was just too much money to do. But yeah, after consulting with attorney, she feels that it absolutely meets the definition of defamation.
Okay. Linda says, I hope Asia listens to the follow-up episode. I want her to know how much I admire and respect her. I truly dislike the way she is treated on social media. Her ability to deal with the unkindness directed at her with common sense and poetic language is an example for all of us.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah, very well said.
Yeah, and I want to touch on too. Chris in the YouTube chat says, "Wouldn't Asia know she was relevant when she gave the affidavit to Rabia?" It's kind of the same type of thing where it's fleet. So she right after Adnan's arrested, she writes these letters, never hears anything, forgets all about it. A year later, he's tried, he gets convicted, and then Rabia comes to her and says, "Can you give me an affidavit for this?" So I think at that point again, she thought like, okay, well maybe it is important. The trial's over, and then that's the last she hears about it for another 14 years. It was a long, or not 14, but it was a number of years before the first appeal came up. The first time they came to her and wanted her to testify, and that's when she called and spoke with Kevin Urich, and all of that happened. So yeah, I think there were these moments where she thought she was relevant, but then nobody ever followed up with her.
Got it. Lucy says, I believe Asia 100%. I believe Adnan is innocent. I have two clarifying questions. Now, for Lucy, the first clarifying question we've kind of already touched on. She was wondering how Asia was sure she had the correct day. So we've talked about some of those anchors. And then two, and we may have touched on this in a past episode. I don't think we've talked about it here. If Asia's boyfriend saw Adnan too, why have they not called him as an alibi witness?
I don't think we've touched on that one yet. So in Asia's letters, she said, so after Adnan was arrested, she talked to her boyfriend and was like, do you remember that guy when you could, because apparently there was like an issue, like her boyfriend was mad at her because he came in and she was sitting there talking to this other guy. And so that, like, it was a thing that was kind of cemented for them. And so when he got arrested, she says that she asked him and he was like, yeah. And his friend that was with him, all three of them said, yeah, I remember that. And she said, well, he got arrested for murder like that day that he was there. But then nobody ever contacted them until I think Sarah Koenig did on Serial 15 years later. And at that point, when they were like, "Do you remember Asia seeing that guy in the library?" At that point, he was like, "I don't remember. I couldn't tell you for sure." So that
Right.
was the end of that. It just comes down to him not being asked at the time.
Right. Burns says, maybe I missed it, but did Asia explain why one of, sorry, I'm going to start again, Brandon. Burns says, maybe I missed it, but did Asia explain why one of the letters was typewritten?
I think the first we got the explanation from that was at the PCR hearing in 2016, where that came up, and she said she actually started writing the letter by hand while she was at school and was like in class. Like she kind of like wrote it throughout the day, because she said there was all kinds of like information coming in, like people that, there were rumors flying and people saying that they heard this and they heard that, and she was talking to people. So she started writing it kind of throughout the day. And then when she got home, she was, I think she wanted to change something or she was adding to it. When she got home, she said she actually like just jumped on the computer and just typed it all out, everything that she had through the day. So that's what she said at the PCR hearing.
And honestly, it makes sense if you go back and read it or listen to it, because it is kind of jumping around. So it makes
Yeah.
sense that she wrote it throughout the day. And Brett and Alice talk about it, that it sounds like a diary entry, which is why it would sound like a diary entry if she
Mhm.
wrote it throughout the day.
Yeah, 100%.
Kristen says, I'm wondering if there were any cameras at the school back then. Also, if Inez had the wrong day and Hay wasn't parked in the circle with her car running, where would she have been parked? And Kristen had another post about something we covered last week as well, which is just, again, people just trying to make sense of various timelines, knowing that it's a tight period of time. It's just a tight period of time from when she was allegedly seen and when she was meant to pick up her cousin. But I do feel like we went into a lot of detail about that last week. So maybe this is Kristen kind of following up on that. So she's just trying to kind of understand, could it have been possible for her to leave the school earlier than anyone remembers, because people are remembering the wrong day, in order for there to be more time before she was supposed to pick up her cousin. I am very much paraphrasing that, Kristen. Sorry if I'm misrepresenting.
Yeah, so as to the cameras, I know there were cameras in the library. I don't know. I assume there were cameras in the school. I don't know. But the problem was, well, to be honest with you, I hope there was no cameras at the school, because the library didn't come up as a place that should have been checked until the Asia letters came out in the beginning of March. And by then it was too late. The tapes had all been recorded over. But I would hope that if there were cameras in the school and Hay went missing, that Adcock would have right away went and tried to, pull that footage to see if they could see who she left with. I mean, it's admittedly that's kind of hindsight too, because we know that she was murdered. At that point, they just, like I said, everybody thought she was off with Don somewhere. So nobody was thinking that someone like abducted her from school. But we do have Grayson in the YouTube chat who used to work at Woodlawn, and he said he doesn't believe they had cameras at the school, but maybe. Truthfully, hopefully not, because I would hope that they would have looked for them. As far as the timing, I don't know. You have Debbie, Becky, and Inez that all say they saw Hay like between 2:45 and 3, which would have been about the time that she would have been leaving to go get her cousin, somewhere around there. By 3 for sure. She's supposed to be there by 3:15. So, I mean, those seem pretty solid. I don't think she probably left too much before that. But at the same time, that, as you referenced, Janet, the discussion we had last week, we don't know that she absolutely had to be at the early learning center at exactly 3:15, or if she could have, showed up anytime before 5 o'clock and that would have not been an issue. We don't, that's something that is really, I don't think, ever been discussed or brought up before our discussion about it last week. And I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I know there was a post, there was a reply to the question about the timeline, in the follow-up, but I didn't cite it because, it's one of those things where sometimes people weigh in with conversation about the questions that are being asked rather than the questions just being asked to you. So I'm not sure if it's correct or not, but someone had said that the Campfield Early Learning Center had called Hayes' family at like 3:30 or something to say, this kiddo is still here. So that would potentially suggest that it was, standing out as, oh wow, this person hasn't, been picked up yet, and that's unusual. But I don't, like I said, I don't know that information to be true, like off the top of my head. That's all.
Yeah, I don't recall ever seeing that, but we can, Zach, if you don't mind, as we move through these, if you go to the website and the case docs, look up Adcock missing person report, and he's got all his notes in there, and see if he wrote in there that he had when they got a call from the early learning center. All I recall seeing from that is that Young had said that she was supposed to pick up her cousin at 3:15.
Which, this season or the first season?
It'll be in season 14.
Okay. So Tara and Katie both are wondering if Kevin Urick did ever face any consequences for completely lying about what Asia said. With the amount of exposure Serial received, it seems like something should have come of that revelation.
Nope, nothing. He's never faced any consequences for anything. And of course, he says Asia's lying. That what he said on the stand about his conversation with Asia, he maintains that's what she actually said. And of course, she says that's absolutely not true.
And the Baltimore District Attorney's Office did chastise him publicly in a sense, right? When it would seem that he fabricated evidence about a different piece of all of this that came up more recently, right? Didn't he present something and say, see, I was talking about this other thing? And didn't the DA's office say, no, he absolutely is making that
Yeah,
up. That's not real. But that's like just sort of a public shaming, I guess.
right.
It's
Yeah,
not like it
and that's
affected
in
his career.
regards right, and that's in regards to part of Adnan's conviction being overturned. One of the Brady violations that was cited by the prosecutor. Now we don't, the letters or the notes are redacted, but they found in the prosecution file that someone had called Urick, and he took down the notes that person said that this person had threatened to kill Hay. And I think I don't remember the exact verbiage of it, but essentially they threatened to kill Hay, and it's redacted, so we can't see who it's about. Urick went on record saying, I was talking about Adnan. That person called and said that Adnan had threatened to kill Hay. And the DA was like, no, that's not true, because they can see the whole thing. They said that that's not true. And then Adnan, in his press conference he did a couple months ago, revealed then that they actually know who it was, and sounds like they have an affidavit from the person who made that call. So it seems like he's absolutely lying about that too. Although Brett and Alice in their podcasts claim they also can tell from context that they were that Urick was talking about Adnan. It's very clear, even though the DA and the judge that have actually seen the entire file both agreed it was a Brady violation, that it was not about Adnan, and that again Adnan's legal defense team sounds like has an affidavit from the person who actually made that call. And also, just for logic's sake, imagine Urick had someone who called and said that Adnan had threatened to kill Hay, and then didn't use it at trial.
Yeah,
Seems legit.
that doesn't make any sense. Kay says, through this whole process, Kay says, I'm becoming more convinced that jury trials are an antiquated and inadequate way of putting guilty people behind bars and keeping innocent people out of prison. Trials are all about spin. Which side can spin the most believable story? Look at how much gaslighting the people we've been listening to have been doing, and look at how successful it's been. Jim Clemente once said that trials by jury are flawed and that we should instead have panels of experts who weigh in on actual evidence and decide on guilt or innocence. No spin, no emotions, just facts. I'm curious to know what you guys think about jury trials given the advancements in technology since the 17th century when they first began. Should they get the boot? If not, how would you like to see them be improved? So big picture question, but I think one that it probably is on a lot of people's minds when we visit cases like this.
Yeah, I agree with Jim in the fact that I've been saying for years too. Like our system is flawed. The jury system is flawed. The idea that we've had so many wrongful convictions where people tell us that they thought the person was innocent, but they were the holdout, and because of pressure put on them or the judge dynamiting the jury and making them stay there until they come up with a verdict, they finally just, without actually believing the person is guilty, cave into saying they're guilty. So the jury system has flaws. the jury selection system has flaws, like the way that the two sides are able to cherry pick out a jury to that's going to be, rather than be an objective weigher of the facts. Instead, they're trying to find somebody that might be sympathetic to their point of view, is a problem. And then the way even Brett and Alice have said this on their show before, that the way they always put it is the best story wins. That's how trials go. And I've put it differently, but I've been saying that for years too. I've read lots and lots and lots of trial transcripts, and you see it. It's like you get days and days and sometimes weeks and weeks and weeks of testimony. And if you've ever sat through testimony, like there's it goes on. You guys hear me a lot of times like breaking down a full day's worth of testimony in 35 minutes. That's because there's 35 minutes of interesting parts of it. The rest of it is not interesting at all. And people tune out and they forget things. And then when it's all done, it's those closing arguments. Who can spin the best story in closing arguments? And the fact that they're allowed, the prosecution and defense are allowed to literally make up a story. And if they misstate, like if they say, and he called him at 2:36, even if you object and say that's, facts not in evidence, the judge will always overrule it and say the jury knows that closing arguments aren't evidence. And they know that, they've been told that, but what they're listening for is tell me a story that makes sense, and whoever can tell the best story. So it is flawed. The problem is that you have the idea of like just having experts weigh in. There's like, I don't know the solution, because the problem is we're dealing with human beings, and so there's always an open door for corruption. Always, right? So on paper, our system should work perfectly, right? So the police do the investigating, and then they just pass that case on to the prosecutor. The prosecution takes their investigation and they give 100% of it over to the defense, and everybody's just out for justice. That's how it looks on paper. But in reality, in most cases, the police force that's doing the investigating and the prosecution are 100% working together. Most of the state's experts are all people that all work together in the same, they're all working together to get a conviction. And it creates a problem. We have this, and the whole system is incentivized by, how do you get reelected as DA? You close the most cases, you win the most death penalty trials. They want to win. I doubt there are many prosecutors in particular that are out there that are like, if I lose, that just means that, golly gosh darn it, we got the wrong guy, and I'm glad justice was served. Nobody looks like that. They lose their job if they lose too many trials like that, because the amount of money that they put into time and resources they put into taking somebody all the way to trial. So I wish I knew what the answer is, but I know that something needs to change. I fully believe that our system is broken. And that is my long rant on it. Janet?
Danielle, I've been waiting to say exactly what you just said in the chat, which is essentially, I can't wait to see how long it takes for us to suggest that AI start deciding the future of people who are being accused of a crime. Don't you feel like that's inevitable? Like with the conversations that are happening now, at some point, someone's going to be like, well, we should just let AI figure it out. Like they'll be that computer is totally impartial. They don't, that thing doesn't have
terrifying.
Opinions. It's just taking information that already exists and synthesizing it and going, well, statistically, it's most likely that this is what happened or whatever. That doesn't make me feel that much better.
Yeah, that idea is exciting and terrifying all at the same time to me, because again, like there's still a human element. There's still, could someone hack the system, and who's control, because AI gets its input from humans.
If you're it's like self-driving cars are hitting people of color because no one realized that it's a different kind of setting when it's not a white person walking across the street. I mean, that should scare the shit out of everybody.
Yeah. So Chris in the chat asks, can you request a judge over a jury trial? You can, but that doesn't always work out either. That's what happened with Jesse Eldridge. Jesse Eldridge's attorney. For those of you that aren't familiar with our season 3, Jesse's case, the case was garbage. There's literally the entire case was his brother claiming to have witnessed this murder, who has since recanted and admitted that he was lying because he was lied to by the police and threatened. But even that, with the story, there was conflicts. There was like no way to prove this case, and so Jesse's attorney, what seemed like the right move at the time, I agree with the move on paper is, well, I don't want some jury in here that are inexperienced, don't know what they're doing, and can be flawed by some spun story by the prosecutor. I want just a judge to hear the facts and weigh out whether there's reasonable doubt, and that's it. And so that seemed like the best thing. And it was a super short trial. I think it was only a couple days or even a day. Now it's more, but it was very, very short trial. And then the judge convicted him. So that didn't work either.
Yeah, I
So
don't
I
have a ton of faith in judges. All due respect, I'm sure I know many of them are wonderful, but go ahead, Deck.
I found a document that says the kindergarten staff called Heyman's uncle to notify him that the daughter has still not been picked up, but doesn't give a time. And then it says, and police were called at approximately 5 p.m. But I cannot find a time.
Okay, so because a few people in the chat were saying that they thought that the call came at 3:30, but that what you just said is what I recall. They were notified by the daycare, but I don't think it ever said when they called. So
Yeah, I haven't seen. I mean, I'll keep looking, but I have not seen.
is that in
anything.
the missing persons report?
That is in the ENI group report.
A NIHI group report. Okay.
Yeah, it's not in the missing persons report at all.
Okay. So in the NIHI group was the private investigator firm that was helping out the family too. So just piecing those together, I know we're circling back to what we were talking about then, but thank you, Zach, for looking that up. But piecing that together, so they called and said she didn't pick him up at some time, and they called the police. Did you say 5 o'clock or 5:30?
That's at 5 o'clock.
At 5 o'clock. Yeah. So they could have called, the school could have called them at 5, and then they called the police right away because they couldn't get a hold of her. It could have been 4. You just had, there's no way to know for sure, but without a time on that again leads me to believe that there was a bigger window there for picking the kids up than we originally thought. That it wasn't like if she wasn't there at 3, because I have a hard time imagining that they get a call at 3:30 that says, she didn't show up, what's going on? And then they wait an hour and a half before they call the police. I know they called some friends maybe too in there. But like when Young called Adnan, it was like right before Adcock called him. So it sounds like Adcock was already there when he was making those calls. So Zach's still looking to see if there's anywhere where it's narrowed down to 3:30. But so what you just said is what I recall, that they were notified from a call from the daycare, but no time was given, and they didn't call the police until 5 o'clock.
Yeah, and I'm not. It's not that so much that I'm pushing back, but I will say we all understand that right now we are talking about opinion and we are speculating. We don't have proof of any of this, and so we're not saying, oh, it definitively means that there was this huge window that we didn't know about. We don't know that, and frankly, I could see a situation in which you find out at 3:30 that didn't happen, and at 5 you call the police. I think that, to me, again, because this is all just sort of opinion and speculation, to me that would make sense. The idea of, I'm trying not to panic. I'm trying to figure out some other reason that this could be happening. And that, by an hour and a half, you're like, I got nothing. There's no other reason. I'm too panicked. I might feel foolish for making this phone call later today. I hope I am. I hope I do feel foolish, but I waited as long as I could. And that was till 5. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're just talking about, choices and behavior, and who knows?
Yeah. And so to be clear, all I'm saying is, there is a possibility on the table that we have to consider that I don't think anyone has considered before. I'm not saying that's what happened, but all we know is for sure is that by 5 o'clock, they knew it was a problem that she hadn't picked up her niece or cousin. Could that have been 3:30? Yes. Could it have been 4? Yes. But all we know based on the evidence we have is based on like what Grayson said, who was familiar with the school up there and the other daycares, that generally you just got to pick up your kid by 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or whatever the time is. And we know that they didn't call the police till 5. We don't know when the daycare called them, so we don't know for sure that she had to be there at 3:15. So that's all I'm saying, is there's a wider range of possibility there. That's all it is just something else to consider.
Is there any other, I'm just asking to ask, but is there any other place that could be in evidence that we just aren't thinking of or aren't aware of right now?
The only other thing I could think of would be Young Lee's trial testimony.
That's where I'm at right now.
But I just read, and you may find it, but I just read through there recently when I was looking to see about the pickup time, and I don't recall him giving a time. Like he didn't even give an exact time for the normal pickup. I think he said 3 or 3:30 again, or 3 or 3:15 again, something like that.
There's a comment from a fellow Janet. Janet, I don't meet a lot of Janet, so I want to welcome you into the YouTube chat. But also, hi everyone else. Janet says the info for the 3:30 p.m. pickup time was given by, in fact, yes, Young Lee during his testimony.
Okay,
That's
so
what
Zach's
Janet says,
cruising
yeah.
through that right now. So we'll see if we can nail that down on the fly as we continue to move through these questions.
Right. And that's tough because it's a trial testimony, and we've already seen information present differently at different
Yeah,
times in
it's a
the.
year later. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not accusing him of lying. Please don't at me. I am absolutely not accusing him of lying in any way, shape,
Right.
or form.
It's just hard to remember,
talking
but
about it.
but Zach will look for that. We're already running pretty long, so let's try to zip through any questions that we have left, so we can wrap this thing up. I just realized we're already 48 minutes in.
Well, this will make you pleased, perhaps, then, because that's really all I have. I mean, there are a couple of other questions and conversation. I've been holding on to things that we haven't really touched on yet, that don't totally make sense or fit quite yet in our timeline. And Melissa asked a question about the sort of accountability of someone who's in a professional career who is also speculating and you know potentially defaming someone on their podcast, and whether or not that has ramifications. I don't feel like we're in a place to
No.
know the answer to that. And, we just want everyone to be guided by morality, but that's not really what happens.
Yeah. And those are lawyer questions. So real quick, I'll wrap it up while Zach's continuing to skim through the testimony. I'll just address what there was. Somebody made a post today, this morning, I think, that generates a pretty good conversation. They just asked, they were trying to understand why people are so quick to believe Asia while not believing Jen. And they asked, it seemed like they were asking a legitimate, like, in a very honest way, the question, like, it seems like it's because Asia, is on and Jen's bad for Adnan. Is that why? And I answered the question there. Yeah, and it was a really good question because it made me think. And I answered the question there, but I just want to lay that out here for that listener who was on Facebook and for anybody else.
That's a great question and a great comparison. It's important to do that stuff and go, where's my bias, or is there a bias? I love this.
Yeah. And the difference for me is, one, all Asia, you have to narrow down, what did Asia say? She said, I remember I was in the library and you were there. That's the end of it. There's nothing in evidence to conflict that. Right. So there's not this like thing that's like, oh, wait, no, but we know Adnan was here. I mean, the only thing in the evidence that conflicts anything she said is Jay. Right. Other than that, everything fits with that story being true. She has told the same story over and over and over again. She has never changed it. She's never given any of it, and nothing conflicts with it. As opposed to Jen, 95% of what Jen told the police, by her own words, her own admission, was simply what Jay told her. That's it. So Jen can believe. Jen doesn't necessarily have to be lying about that stuff for it to be incorrect, because she's relaying what Jay told her. The only part of that of anything that Jen has ever said that is an experience that she personally experienced were Jay leaving the house, or Jay getting the call and leaving the house sometime after 3:45, possibly even 4 o'clock, she says in her police interview, and her picking Jay up and wiping shovels off. So these are the elements that we have. So with Jen, then we go to Jay, who says the pickup happened in a completely different place and there was no wiping off of shovels that night. So, like, the only evidence we have that could corroborate Jen, that should corroborate Jen, is Jay, right? She's talking about an experience that her and Jay had together. And then she says, yep, I was sitting at the Westview Mall waiting for him. Adnan and Jay pulled up. Adnan got out, said, hey, girl, we talked for a minute. Then Jay got in the car. Jay tells the story. Adnan dropped me off at home. He drove away. I was sitting at home by myself, and then Jen came over and picked me up. All right, so one of them has to be lying. They're completely different stories, the two things that they're saying that happened. So there's there's legitimate reason, and I don't want to go on and on and on about this, but the comparison is there's legitimate reasons not to believe Jen. Also, with Jen, you can take the totality of all of the evidence. You can take Becky's statement and Debbie's statement and Coach Sai's statement. You can do the drive times with the cell tower maps, and you can put all this together and see there's no way that Adnan could have done any of this. They're literally, again, I've been saying this for months now, and no one can still take me up on it. All they want to do is insult me rather than do what I'm asking, which is give me a timeline with the evidence that actually works where Adnan could have even possibly done this, and no one can do it. There isn't a version of that story that exists. So knowing that, then when she's saying, well, Jay said that Adnan killed her that day, he told me on January 13th that happened, you know, when I picked him up that night, I have reason not to believe that because I have evidence that shows that that's not what happened. So for me, I just thought I would lay that out, the kind of the contrast in a very basic way. There's nothing to contradict Asia's story, and she's never changed it. And then, but Jen's story is directly contradicted by Jay. So there's a conflict there. So you immediately have problems, and then the problems continue to snowball from there. So I thought I would lay that out. And were you able to find anything in there, Zach?
No, I'll still keep scrolling, but I have not seen anything yet.
We'll touch back on it next week. Janet did say that she said that was not in both testimonies. So I'm wondering if maybe he said something about it in the first trial, but not the second trial.
If a listener sees it, please send it to me. You can send it to me directly, and I'll make sure it gets brought up next week.
Yep, do that, and then we'll quote that next week. We want to make sure that we get that right because I'm genuinely interested in that too. And then also, like, is there any kind of anchor in there? You know, when somebody's recalling a time, as we always say, they're recalling a time from a year before. Is there any kind of anchor, or is he just like, yeah, it happened? You know, they called me at 3:30. So, and anyway, with that, we're going to leave you guys with that. There will be this Sunday. We're getting into episode 7 on the main feed. We're covering part 7 there. I don't remember what part 7 was. I wish I did. I would tell you, I would give you a heads up on what it is, but I don't remember. And then on the Patreon feed, you guys are getting part 12 coming up on the Patreon feed on Sunday. And then we will have a follow-up next week. And then we'll start our week off after that. So a lot of that being said, thank you guys. Oh, one last little housekeeping note, as Janet mentioned. Please, when I put up the post on our Facebook group asking for questions for the follow-ups, please try not to have conversations on there. Remember, those questions are for to be asked here on the show, and Janet has to sort through all of those in order to collect the questions to ask. And if people start like commenting back and forth, that just turns into a real mess for her. So
well, it's hard because I want to include all of that, but then it's just a conversation. So then it's weird because I'm just saying, and then so-and-so said this. Well, let's move on because like it's sort of not a question anymore. Anyway, it's very fascinating conversation stuff, though. I just wanted to give people, if people want to know, new stuff covered in part 7. We see topics covered, new revelations from the defense file, the role religion played in the trial, and Alonzo Sellers being cleared as a suspect.
There we go. That's coming up on Sunday. And with that, we will let you guys go. Thank you guys so much for joining us on the YouTube Live. We want to thank all of our patrons. Thank you to every single one of you that just subscribe and listen every week and participate in these discussions. We really appreciate it. We love you all. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
All right. Step on the audio ski.
Oh my gosh, Amy, if you're still in here, I know we got a couple Amy's, but the Amy that said that you had decided to wait on listening to Bob's Sunday episode on Patreon so that you weren't confused this week, I applaud you. I absolutely did not do that. But I'm so happy because this week I don't think I screwed anything up. But I couldn't reply. I can't join the chat from where we are on StreamYard. I can't hop into YouTube. I can't ever comment. So if anyone ever wonders, like, oh, Janet never actually writes anything into the comments, I literally can't. I have to be on YouTube, like on my phone to do that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Too many things for me to, but anyway, Amy, I did see that.
Someone did ask in the YouTube chat, Cece wanted to know, off topic, she said she read that there's a season 2 of Platonic coming.
Yes.
Do you think you would do more episodes?
I certainly would. I would love to do more of that show. Who knows? There's just a lot of like, we're very conditioned in this industry to just expect nothing good and then be pleasantly surprised if something happens.
Yeah. Well,
So
I have
it'd be great
almost
if
no
it did.
almost no experience in the industry, but like when we did our West Memphis 3 show, it was like they came out and Oxygen was like, these are literally the best ratings we've had for any show this entire year. And then all the producers are like, well, we're doing a season 2. Let's start thinking about the next case. It's 3 years later. They haven't asked us to do a
Yeah,
season 2. So I guess that's the end of
it's
that.
crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's not it's not in the testimony that's posted on the case files.
Okay. I'll check when I get some time. I'll look into maybe you said it in the first trial, because I'm like really curious about that. And I'm glad you clarified, Janet, because I want to make sure we're clear that we're just something we're more thinking out loud and not saying it's the case.
Right.
But what a change that would be if it was like they get out of school at 3:15, but she, as long as she gets in before 5, she's fine. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, so she had an hour and a half to kill,
Yeah.
after school that she could have went and done something. It just opens up a whole lot more possibilities as to what could have happened.
No, it does. I mean, I don't want anyone to think that we're saying Young is lying when he says it was very unusual or that it would have been, that they would have noticed because she was always very punctual. Like, if that's all stuff that is like nailed down as Young
Yeah.
saying it over and over, like nobody's like not team Young. You know what I mean? I was thinking about
Yeah.
that when I was thinking about the like believing Jen versus not, believing Asia. It's like the only team we're on is like the anger I hold is not for anyone. It's not even for Jay, quite honestly. Like the anger I hold is for the system and the people who took advantage of the system and who had done it before and somehow were to believe that they didn't do it this time. Like just that kind of stuff is infuriating.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I just have like a ton of sympathy and empathy for everybody, including Jen.
Yeah. Well,
What
especially
a horrible situation.
Yeah. Yeah, and as far as like with the whole Young thing with this, like I want to hear it, like not because I need it to fit something. This is not going to make it like, oh, because of this, Adnan's innocent. Like it's not anything like that. I would genuinely want to know what happened to Hay, and I want to know if there's something we've been missing, if there was a
Absolutely.
whole big
Absolutely.
possibility. And so I'm curious what Young said. If he's like, no, I know I got home from school at 3:30, and right when I got home they called me, or if because I
Yeah.
know from in his testimony at the second trial, as far as the time she was supposed to pick them up, he was ambiguous about it. Like he didn't nail it down and go like, no, that was at 3 o'clock. She was supposed to be there. He said, I think he said 3. Well, you probably just read, Zach. Didn't he say like 3 or 3:15?
It's 3 or 3. I wrote down 3 or 3:15, and there was at some point that he said it takes like 15-20 minutes to get there.
Yeah, and then Uric in closing said that she was supposed to be picked up by 3 o'clock. So that's what that we had there. But yeah, so there was a bit of ambiguity there, still there. So it didn't seem like he had 100% certainty on time.
I'm trying to go through your old files and see if I can find it. But
I don't think I ever posted the first trial.
It looks like there's a segment, like there's like one page that you posted.
Yeah, and it's probably from the one you just read. All right, we can go and wrap this up. Janet probably wants to eat dinner or do something. Or
I got to take the dog for a nighttime walk because it's night in the winter at 6 o'clock. It's so sad. Chris, I am so sorry that your kid's preschool charged $1 a minute after being 3 minutes late. That is shocking.
Wow, that is great. So yeah, like my kid's school when he was in like the preschool that also did daycare, like they would charge you if you were late. But again, pickup was like school got out at 3:30, but you had till 5 to pick them up. But if you weren't there at 5, then you got, I don't remember.
Which I want people, I mean, if people are staying late, like obviously I want their salaries to be paid. Like it makes sense if you're taking advantage of that. But $1 a minute that's a lot.
Right. Thanks, Devin, for the super chat. Appreciate it. Cheers, Bobbert and
Devin.
Janet. See you soonish, Zach. Apparently you're gonna be
you can't say cheers to me too.
You're gonna be coloring on Devin soon.
Oh, apparently.
Sounds like it. All right. And with that, I think we are ready to.
I see her husband on Saturday.
Her husband?
Her husband.
Well, I bet she's coming with her husband.
No, because they're making cookies or some shit.
Oh, that's dumb.
There was a whole ordeal about it. I see. Look, I have a memory. Yeah, kind of.
And Lisa is our last comment before we go. We love you too, Lisa.
We love you, Lisa. We love all you guys. Thanks for keeping us company and having great stuff to say.
I don't know. This may just end everything. I'm going to see if I don't know what's going to happen because the whole thing is fucked up. Source studio.
No.
I'm going to hit